The Remarkable People Podcast. Check it out. The Remarkable People Podcast. Listen, do, repeat. For life. The Remarkable People Podcast.
Hello, my remarkable friends. Welcome to this week of the Remarkable People Podcast. This is a new one. So we had some crazy stuff happen this weekend, life things that happened to us all. And our guest, after waiting almost 9 months to be on the show, was willing and able to switch to an earlier time slot so we could bring you this great recording. What happened, though, was a first for us in 4 years. This guest, while we've had other guests come back and be on hanging out episodes, this is the first guest that while we were recording, we realized that we're pressed for time. There's just so much great content. We're going to come back and do a hanging out episode. So in this episode, you're going to get a power-packed episode of real, authentic, transparent Christianity, religion versus relationship, personal inner demons, the darkness versus the light. We're going to talk about failures versus moral successes. We're going to talk about personal and professional. We're going to talk about a ton of things with our guests today. So when you're listening to this episode, stick through it. Like most of our episodes, they just keep building and building and building and getting better. And the practical life tips of what the guest not just overcame or achieved in the story, but the actual steps of how they were able to achieve and overcome what they did are throughout the episode. But in this particular episode, the whole episode kind of grooms our mind and gets us ready for the end where the practical steps are. So today's guest is Adrian Koehler. He is going to take us through his life from birth to today, and we're going to talk about many, many things. As you're listening, put your filter into seeking truth mode. Not as what I'm saying right, not as what you're saying right, not as what Adrian's saying right, but what's God saying is right. And if you're someone that doesn't believe in God, definitely listen to this episode, because Adrian and I are going to talk about how we go through different phases. We go through believing in the sense of just, yeah, I believe there's a God, or maybe I don't believe there's a God, to, okay, I've trusted God in my life, sold out to him, or there's 1,000 levels in between. But religion versus relationship, and that honesty and transparency and that realness versus the fake show that most people have today is a central theme of this episode. So I know this was a long intro. I know many of you have been with us for 4 years. I know many of you have the Remarkable People Volume 1 book. I know many of you share it with your friends and family on a weekly basis. I know you're from all over the world, and we love you no matter where you're from or what place you are on earth. But listen to this episode, because we get into a lot of really fine details that are misconceptions in the world. Like people say all the time, don't judge. But we talk about the difference between being judgmental and having godly judgment. And that's what we're commanded to do. We talk about a bunch of stereotypes. So check out this episode. Again, today's guest is Adrian Koehler, like James Taylor. And he is a great guy from everything I've known. He's been very patient. We had to rush a little bit through the episode, but it'll be worth your time when you listen, and then check us out on the next follow-up episode as well in the Hanging Out Podcast, RPP Plus. So I'm David Pasqualone. I've talked plenty of time. Let's get into this episode now. Hey, Adrian, how are you today, brother?
I'm great, man. Great to be here, David. Thanks for having me.
Oh, no, it's an honor. You've been super wonderful and flexible. I just told our listeners a little bit about you, how we had to kind of shift the meeting last minute, how you've already waited months to be on here, and we're so thankful and grateful you're here today to share your remarkable journey. So I really appreciate it, brother.
Yeah. Well, No problem at all. Number one, first things first. And always just great to talk to once you and I connected, I don't know, a couple months ago, maybe a few months ago now around this opportunity and you wanted me to be on the show. I thought, okay, this is great. So whatever it takes to make this happen. Awesome. And I can't wait to connect with your listeners and hopefully can provide some value.
Yeah, man. And we'll start off, we'll guide you through the past, the present, the future, your life, but we always start off each show. Our listeners, they may be with us for the last 4 years and listen to every episode, or we might be talking to somebody new who this is the first time they've listened to the Remarkable People podcast. But Adrian, if they're going to listen to your episode, they're probably going to get dozens of gold nuggets. But if there's one thing you're like, if you listen to this episode from start to finish, this is what you're going to walk away with. What's that one truth or purpose or passion that you're going to be able to leave with them to help them?
Great question. I was just thinking about when I rode back from LAX last night in this Uber, talking to this young kid. He's 21. And I liked him. And he immediately, as soon as I got in, he said, how much is Uber charging you? Because at LAX, you got to pay like a whole lot of money to get a ride, to have them pick you up at the curbside instead of walking to the lot. So I always do that just to save time and energy. And he's a hustler right away. Because he said to me, how much is Uber charging you for this? And I said, $100. He said, do you want to just do this off the books? And I'm like, oh, I like this guy. He's got his own little side hustle inside of Uber. We ended up having a really robust conversation all the way the 35 minutes from LAX to my home. And he had lots of questions for me. He came out of the medical world, interested in getting in the medical world. I came out of the medical world, have a lot of experience. And he'd been set up. He's applying to PA school, and he's gone for 4 interviews, and he's failed them all. And after a big long convo about his background and my background, one of the nuggets for him, because he said, "How are you so good at interviewing? I could tell you're really good at this." Because I told him whatever my journey, and I got all these jobs, and I can interview well, and I can fake it. He said, "How do you get so confident?" And I said, "Oh, you don't get confident, man. You just choose courage. Courage looks a lot like confidence. And courage says, I'm scared to death, and I might be a fool, and I might fail, but it's worth it. The outcome is worth it. So I'm going to throw myself at it." That's courage. And that looks a lot like confidence. Everybody today is really wants this sensation of confidence. Like, I feel secure in myself, but I'm a pretty talented guy, pretty confident guy, pretty gregarious guy. Look really comfortable when you see me in any kind of situation. When I'm talking to some kind of bigwig at a company or whatever, I look really calm and secure, but I'm not. And I coach type A, driven, ambitious, world-class leaders. And they, being the most successful people in their fields, being world-class minds, being, set apart, they're not confident either. They look like it. But there's tools that they have chosen and that we work through in my work with them, which really puts courage at the center of their target. And if you put courage, which we don't talk about that much in our culture these days, because we're so tied up in emotional states, and anyway, you can spend 2 hours on that. But with the hyper-therapeutic culture we live in, people go for some kind of therapeutic state instead of believing in themselves and believing that action and commitment can get you through the day. So I don't know if that's the most important thing to share, but that's top of mind just because I was in the conversation with this kid last night. And anyway, it was a great exchange. So courage beats confidence every single day.
Yeah, that's great and very true. And especially in a society, not just in America, but globally, where honestly, so many people are watered down, and men aren't men, and women aren't women. And it's really a issue. So let's do this. To bring you to this point in life where this is your passion and this is what you do every day, and this is what you're excellent at and get paid to do. Let's start off your beginning of your life. We'll work chronologically through it. The good, the bad, the ugly. What made Adrian the man he is today? So what was your upbringing like? Mom, dad, grandparents, brothers, sisters, orphanage? Where did your life start, bro?
It's really ironic that it's great to be able to talk about this just because I just completed a 4-day road trip with my stepson, who's 18, and he's going off to college and going to go play football in college. And I'll probably get into some of the details about what makes this trip really significant, but I just drove from LA. He dropped me off at Columbus, Ohio airport, and I got to go through my hometown. And I don't know if anybody has this experience when you go through your hometown and get to relive all these memories. So much comes back and is like, it's captivating. I don't know if you have that experience. I do. I want to like drive every street in my hometown and collect all these memories. So, and I just got
Yeah,
to see my parents.
100% true. Same thing. And the only other thing
Yeah.
I'd say is, doesn't it feel smaller?
Oh, it feels smaller. It feels more desolate. I don't know if it's just me or it just felt more epic when I was there. And now as an adult, I come back and like, wow, this place is sleepy. I guess I didn't know anything else before. I mean, I've lived in big cities. As soon as I could get to the big city, I did. I moved to Chicago right after undergrad. Now I've been living out in LA for 18 years. So obviously I chose diversity and I chose action in this little town in the middle of nowhere in Southern Illinois, Salem, Illinois, 8,000 people when everybody's home. I guess it is naturally pretty sleepy, but it felt really epic when I was there. So let's see. To your question. So youngest of two boys, born July 6, 1980. And I had an older brother named Court. He was 3 years older than me, born to Jim and Angie. They both grew up around this small town in Southern Illinois, and both of them were public school teachers for 35 years. And so we had it was very kind of unique, I guess, upbringing in the sense that both my parents were teachers. So growing up, the whole family was on the same schedule, which was pretty cool. I don't think I really got it at the moment. And now being a working dad and having a pretty atypical schedule, I could do whatever I need to do with my kids. I don't have a 9 to 5, nor will I ever, for a handful of reasons. But it was really cool. And my mom and dad are awesome people. I mean, they're obviously human beings, and there was parts of it that worked and parts of it that didn't work. And we can double click on any of that stuff that you want to, but really great humans. And so it was, I joke often that I grew up in an episode of Friday Night Lights. That's what my life was like. So small town, everybody knows everybody. My dad was the football coach. My dad coached me and my brother through everything. Both my brother and I were athletes. And he was what we would have called a hoss in Southern Illinois. Big dude, just broad shoulders, he's the home run hitter, state winner in shot put, center and linebacker on the football team. I was not. I was small, runt-like, which was a big gift to me later in life, or kind of as I developed, it was good for me. I'm definitely younger brother mentality, like chip on my shoulder, something to prove, and I like that. I like I like a challenge. I mean, that's kind of the gift to it now. I like the odds being stacked against me, kind of feeling like the underdog, anyway, gritty. And then, would bend the rules when necessary in order to get the advantage, which usually meant when I was having a fight with my brother, I was the one that would grab a rock or a stick or whatever, just to kind of even the odds up because he was huge, but really fast growing up. So anyway, grew up playing sports. My parents were very involved in the community, which was a huge gift. Like my dad literally built the T-ball and junior league baseball diamonds, like welded them. He built them. And so I spent all my youth like fixing up baseball diamonds, so kind of idyllic in that way, like, mowing and chalking the lines, and spent all summers playing baseball, but played sports all year round. And so anyway, in that kind of mindset growing up, and my parents were both spiritually minded as well. And they were a part of the church that I grew up in. So they helped plant this church. So, and for those that are listening that don't come from that background, they were like, I don't know, it's like kind of starting a group, and then they were very involved all throughout. So kind of it was a traditional Christian viewpoint, some of which I've kept over the years, some of which I've discarded, but really grateful for it. It really grounded me in some of these values and some ideals now that I take for granted, that some people aren't built into a worldview that's altruistic and generous and thought and ethical. I was born into that context. So anyway, that was great growing up. And then, high school was high school, and what to share, kind of went after everything. Naturally, just kind of went after, I don't know, I do leadership coaching now. People usually ask how I got into leadership or why I got into that. I needed leadership. Like I needed it kind of as a person, and I always had coaches and stuff, and I gravitated towards leaders, but also leadership always, put my roots in the soil. I realized early that like life circumstances are up for grabs. We never quite know what's going to happen in the moment. And a leader is the one that shapes them. And a leader is the one that pulls people together to navigate them. And I realized, like being a leader actually feels more comfortable to me than being a follower. So got into leadership that way just because I was some anxious kid. you wouldn't have seen it on the outside. I kept it together pretty well, but internally pretty socially anxious, like every 13-year-old, 14-year-old. And anyway, so got into leadership work early in high school, and naturally in that space, which came back to serve me now. High school was a fun ride. I had a freshman year, broke my arm in football. That was a big moment for me. And it really sent me on a philosophical nosedive, because I'd always been the athlete guy, and I broke my arm in the middle of a football game. And now who the hell am I now? If I'm not the quarterback of the football team, who am I now? That's what started kind of first round of maybe hedonism will work, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Let's go do that. So I was like, freshman in high school, and going and, trying to dip my toe in every pool that might have some meaning or might have some thrill in it. Did that hardcore for a couple years, which is pretty hard to pull off in small town America. If you want to do it, like my parents weren't into that, that's for sure. So had to keep it kind of behind the scenes.
And before you go on too, because that kind of ties together with the church involvement. Was it one of the ones they're planning a church? So it was Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday nights, youth group on Thursdays, midweek activities. Was it that involved or?
Oh, very involved. Every time we were there, we were the ones unlocking the door. So yeah, we were very involved. So yeah, there was like it started this kind of dual life for me of like having this proper engagement that would work in order, like with my parents and like with the expectations around me, and then kind of building this other also pursuit, which this theme would come back later in life too, where it's like kind of these dual Adrians that I was experimenting with and seeing if I could pull off having these two different worlds happening. So yeah, very involved.
And if you don't mind, this may tie down the road. So you can be like,
sure,
hold that thought. Or you can be like, I don't want to answer. But
whatever, yeah.
With your parents being minded for what they believe, this is God, we want to serve God. Yep. And you're a teenager, teenagers have to choose their own way. At that point, do you remember you heard everything they taught all the time?
Right.
But did you believe in and trust God at that point? Or were you just like, hey, this is what I'm born into? I have no idea.
Well, it probably happened in phases. I liked being exemplary. Now, I don't know why that was so. I think I knew that if I was exemplary, like the kid that knew the answers, like the kid that would step up, I knew that kind of, I guess we all kind of get trained in that. Like we figure out how to get on, how to get through, how to win favor, how to be, how to be essential in the tribe. I think we learned that, like how to be essential because we're tribal. And so I knew all the stuff. I definitely didn't. Let me think back. There's parts of it that I believed for sure. It definitely wasn't tested though. I mean, when I hit that kind of existential crisis at freshman year, I rejected most of it. Now, why did I reject most of it? Because I saw that I didn't know a faith at that point. I didn't know a faith that could handle struggle. I didn't know a faith that could handle doubt. We didn't talk about that much. So all the answers don't matter, really, I think, probably in life. The answers don't matter. It's what do you do in the questions? And nobody had modeled that like struggle is a part of the faith and doubt is a part of the faith, and inauthenticity and being broken or whatever you want to call it, that's a part of it. Nobody had really modeled that. And so when I came to my own struggles, my own being a teenager, as you called it, there wasn't a lot of places that seemed to overlap. Like my parents didn't share their struggles. They didn't share their doubts. They didn't share their insecurities. They didn't share their dark history with me. So when my present started getting dark, I figured that there needed to be two paths here. There's kind of this faith, shiny looking thing over here that felt inauthentic in some ways or felt maybe altruistic or whatever. But then you kind of need to feel guilty or shame. That's all you can do over there is just feel guilt and shame when you fuck it up. There's no space that the kind of the God of the scriptures or whatever, he had standards for you and you better get your shit together. And then once you get your shit together, then God's cool with you. Now they would say opposite of that, but they didn't live opposite of that. So when I went dark, I didn't know that there was space for me in the faith conversation, not authentically. I could still go do the dance and go to church and act all blah, blah, blah. But it didn't seem like there was a spot in which I could be found. So that came later. So whenever I went hardcore and the drinking and the drugs and the girls and all that stuff, I did that hardcore for, I don't know, a couple years. And then that ended up, I felt the emptiness in that as well. I was always a seeker as a kid. Like I was always asking those deep questions and wondering about deep things, which there wasn't a lot of room for, not a lot of like exploration with my parents, or, you know, I had some peers that would do that, which usually means get really high and listen to Led Zeppelin and wonder about what it means. But you know, when I went to the end of that rope, that's when I went back to the scriptures myself. And that's what shifted, like kind of first round of like authentic faith journey myself. That's when I started reading the scriptures for myself. And that's when I actually went and looked at the kind of the person of Jesus in the New Testament. And I won't get too into that because I might lose some listeners, but I went and saw.
No, hey, our listeners are from all over the world. They come at
That's
this
great.
for truth and growth. You go wherever you want, whether we gain listeners or lose listeners. I don't
That's
care,
great.
as long as we glorify God and help people grow.
Awesome. Well, so for me, when I started reading the scripture for myself, which is very different than like doing it because somebody else told you to. I started looking because I needed some answers. I knew that I'd done the toe the line and that didn't work for me. I knew that I'd done the go to the abyss and that didn't work for me. And I was still lost. Neither one of those ways worked for me. So I needed to find something that mattered. And when I went to the scriptures myself, and I just said, well, let's go back to the chief here. Let's see what Jesus was up to. And then I found that he as a whole did not have time or interest in, you know, securing, teaching, leading religious people. He was actually the opposite. He was rebellious. And he turned the whole thing on its head from like the religious system that was built there. That's why they killed him, because he said things, did things that broke the rules. And that, first off, that was interesting to me. Second off, when anybody that was like seeking, and especially those that were really in a hard spot, they were broken, they'd made some huge mistakes, either privately they had or publicly they had, those folks he got closest to. You know, he went close to the prostitutes. He went close to the crooked people, the tax collectors that were like the scoundrels of the day. He got close to them. He got close to the adulterer. He got close. He got close to the lepers. He got close to the ones that the culture was shunning. He said, no, this person, I see them. I'm with them. Their problems aren't my problems. I'm with them. And that kind of penetrating love, or that kind of love that transversed and went beyond, that was captivating to me. So like last half of my high school career was really about finding that for me, and the fact that I could finally be honest, I could be real. And so I spent a lot of the last half of my high school career exploring that for myself. And then being the guy that I'd stopped drinking and stuff, and would go to the parties, but wanted to have deep conversations. So I'd hang out in the kitchen, and when people got hammered, then we'd talk. And they called me the priest. I wasn't Catholic, but they called me the priest because I just sit around, wait around. And when they want to talk, and everybody needs to talk, everybody wants to talk. And I was the guy at the party that used to throw the parties, now that wasn't drinking and was there to talk about how they were really doing. That became a theme in my life as well. Like, what's the real conversation you want to have, or the real conversation you need to have but don't want to have, and you're just dying for a person to show up in your life that's got space for you. I love that. I needed that myself, because I knew that having the real conversation with them would be having the real conversation with me. I knew that although I didn't have a lot of the answers spiritually, I did have the right pursuit, which was to like that there's a benevolent God and it's family, and there's nothing that'll separate you from the love of God, the scriptures say. That was a captivating idea to me. And being with people and helping folks that were downhearted and broken and scared and ashamed come to the surface. I needed that, and people need that. So a lot of those years from like junior high school through college was really about that. That was like that captivated me, man. Like the fact that God was for the world, not against the world. That was an idea worth throwing my life at. And so definitely during that season of my life, like that was number one for me, is like, oh no, there's a reality here, a spiritual reality I still don't think there's anything more captivating as far as like, if you're going to find an idea, find a pursuit and an aim that makes life meaningful, being a part of the redemption of humanity, that's pretty cool. And that's like macro and micro, like that, like tells you what to do when you pass a homeless dude on the street. It tells you what to do when you hit an ethical crossroads in your business. If you're a part of the redemption of the world, for me, like God, if there's big questions about what God's up to in the world, it's up to you developing into the most integrous gift to other people. I'm still convinced of that God's will is really around who I'm becoming, and to be rebellious. And if the world's dead pretty much. I mean, as a whole, the world's dead. Like people just are coasting through life, trying to get by and get a decent 85 years and, not feel guilty about it, not be on their deathbed with some regrets. That's how the world lives, like playing not to lose. And playing to win was like going all in and having, following your gut and being for other people and having the conversations people are scared to death to have, but are desperate to have. Like, so being on the search for those soul shaking conversations, that became probably the most thrilling thing for me. And that shaped really my late high school and college days. And so I left high school, went to a school that really nobody from my high school went to go play football. I was not the most talented guy, but I was going to be the most hardworking guy. And so that gave me opportunities in college. Played at a little D3 school in Central Illinois called Millikan University, and didn't know what I wanted to do when I grew up. I went, I loved the sciences. I love biology and anatomy and physiology, and all that stuff really worked for my brain. And got a pretty good memory and systems thinking. So I could figure all that out. I was like a pre-med guy, even though I didn't know any doctors, but sounded pretty cool. But, realized that was kind of the dream of my grandmother. So the whole idea of like asking a 17-year-old, what do you want to be when you grow up, I think is a pretty silly question, because it's usually around vocation instead of who do I want to become as a human being. That's a more important question to ask. And you'll find out what you're going to do vocationally later, but who are you going to become is the most important question. I was pre-med for a bit, but I was still captivated by traveling the world and making the biggest difference. That came from a faith background in my mind at that time. But I went on and got a nursing degree in college and lived it up in college, had a blast, was not a party guy in college, was a student leadership involvement guy in college, was involved in lots of different student organizations. So nursing major and football player. So I was kind of this oxymoron. There weren't really, there was only 2 dudes in my nursing program. So I kind of liked being rare. I liked being unique. That made it more fun for me. And I really just got involved in student and people's lives, and got involved in community service, that kind of stuff. Then moved to Chicago after college because I was dating a girl that lived in Chicago during my senior year. We broke up 2 weeks after I got there. So now I'm in the big city, Chicago. And anyway, took a job, worked at a children's hospital there, and worked in the pediatric intensive care space. Did that for a couple of years and loved it. Never wanted to be a nurse like as a career, but loved the opportunity that nursing was. And, I guess everybody kind of has some view of what that is. For me, I was in the middle, right at the crossroads, standing with people in the most crucial day of their life, mostly. For those that have kids, you know what I'm talking about. Like if your kid's on the brink of death, every word matters, every second matters. And the fact that I could be in between medical care and the family unit and be the guy at the crossroads, helping to translate information, helping to motivate, getting the doctors to be humans, that was a feat, because they just want to go talk data, and getting moms and dads to like find themselves. Usually moms would be very hysterical or just, scared to death and loud and controlling naturally. And that's a good mama's job. When the chick is in trouble, mama hen comes out. Dads would usually get really quiet and angry. And so to get people to the table in a way that works for them, and so that they could actually make good decisions and stay connected in the midst of chaos instead of disintegrate in the midst of chaos, that was important to me. And a huge opportunity became really my calling card. I would say, give me the hard family. When I came into the hospital in the morning, I said, who's struggling? Let me be with them. And I loved it. This was fast paced. You had to be sharp and do 15 things in 5 minutes. And I'm very competitive and like action and getting stuff done and pulling off, things that seem impossible, but then also doing that with presence. That was really meaningful to me. So I did that for a little while. While I was there, involved. Still, my faith conversation was alive for me, was involved in a church there. And I was a musician back in the day too. You could tell I wasn't ever that focused. I tried to do it all, which, you know, people usually say, pick a thing, you know, live your strengths and all that. I maybe. I think, especially when you're younger, it's what I was telling this Uber kid last night. It's like, man, your 20s are for experimenting. So just experiment. If you can, experiment in the same direction, but go do it all. Go have every experience you could have, you know? So I definitely did that in my 20s. So I was a musician guy and would be on teams going overseas. And I heard a message, I heard a speech or a sermon, whatever you want to call it, from this guy named Erwin McManus when I was with a team in India. I was supposed to listen to the talk before we left on the trip, but I didn't. So I'm sitting, I'm like trying to take a nap. I'm like taking a nap on this cot in India with this team of 20 people. And I listened to this talk called The Barbarian Way Out of Civilization. And I was stricken. This guy talked about faith. This guy talked about Jesus, this rebellious figure, in a way that was so captivating to me. Nobody had ever talked about faith or about Jesus like that before. And I thought, holy shit, I want to go be near this guy. So I packed a bag and I moved to Los Angeles, and I, took a travel nursing job and became an intern at this church called Mosaic, and with this guy named Erwin McManus. And
not that it matters, but what was the, I guess, what's it called? Like you're Baptist or Catholic? What was the denomination?
Yeah, it was, Mosaic has officially always been Southern Baptist, but we were we weren't conservative at all. We were like the outlier in that organization. We called ourselves the research and development arm of Christianity back then. We like pushed the lines from a handful of things. I mean, we had, services and nightclubs downtown, and anybody can come. And we had a very diverse group of people that were there. Like, loved having atheists in the room, love having Muslims in the room, love having Hindus in the room. I mean, we're very inclusive before inclusive became a political statement. It was like, we were like, anybody that had any kind of seeking in them, come here. We're on this exploration together. And we always used to say, you can always belong here way before you believe. You don't even ever have to believe. You can belong here and we'll be your family. And it was great. And it was like in LA, we had like 3,000 people, which is like, if you guys are around church world at all, that doesn't happen in the city. It happens in the suburbs with all like very homogenistic society, but in heterogenistic, whatever the word would be, heterogeneous. Anyway, diverse society, it doesn't happen in the city. Big churches don't happen, but at Mosaic it did. And so I moved out and was an intern and did whatever it took. And my passion for the streets, my passion for standing with marginalized people or poor and the oppressed or whatever you want to call it, that always got me going. So they ended up asking me to stay on staff after this internship program, where I went and got a theology degree and had built a handful of things and was really involved in some key work at the church. And I helped run the nightclub venue. They said, hey, would you stay? And that was a crossroads moment for me. I'd already been to Africa several times and met a guy over in Africa that I thought was my next mentor, a guy named Dan Moyer, because he was kind of like if Jesus and Crocodile Dundee were one person. He was like crazy and awesome. And I thought, oh, that'd be pretty cool. He was like a guy that if a crocodile was like killing villagers, he's the guy that would go in and do it. Or he like built a bridge with his bare hands. Anyway, just super cool dude. But Erwin asked me to stay. And I'm so glad I did. So I spent the rest of my 20s in this very altruistic, adventurous community, and got to become a guy that was helping to shape it. So, and I loved it. So I was a pastor guy. So I'd meet with people all the time on their spiritual pursuit. And, lots of people came to faith all the time at Mosaic. We were not an insider group. We were an outsider group. We were always looking for somebody that was seeking. And that was great. And it really fit my personality. And I loved it and got to mobilize about 2,000 volunteers a year to go make a difference in the community or globally, and got to lead a whole bunch of teams. I mean, then I got to start to fuse my nursing background and emergency medicine background and faith. So like when Katrina happened, like me and a team of 15 people went to Houston actually to receive all the folks that were escaping New Orleans. Or, when the earthquake happened in Haiti, I got a phone call saying, Adrian, what are we going to do? And 24 hours later, I had a plan together, had 8 people enrolled, 3 doctors and 3 nurses and a couple of EMTs. And we were in Haiti, 5 days after the quake and setting up a clinic and helping people that were scared to death, and many of them hurt. And so got to feel like this kind of Jack Bauer / existence for a while, which was awesome. 24 reference for those listening that haven't seen it. Anyway, like this kind of, it's go time, and like feeling like, you're on some kind of like mission that's like captivating. I don't know if other people, I don't know where they get their meaning. Captivating mission is a big part of where I get my meaning. Like, holy shit, I am doing today what I'll be proud of tomorrow. Like that type of mentality, instead of just kind of cruising through the day. Like I wanted to live the epic. I wanted to do something I knew would last. And that was thrilling to me. So I did that for a good while. Through that, helped a guy named Jesse come to faith, whose dad was a billionaire. So he was a millionaire. He grew up like Jewish, atheist, and I just happened to be the guy that met him, at the nightclub venue downtown at Mosaic, and helped him in his own kind of spiritual exploration. If we had a lot of time, I'd tell you that whole story, but helped him get connected to his own faith process. And then he wanted to give a lot of his money away naturally, because he wasn't a crazy trust fund kid. He just had a lot of money in a bank account. And after he had this epiphany around meaning and spiritual life, he wanted to do something with his money. So he asked me to leave the work at Mosaic to help him figure out what to do with his money. So that was a big move, and it was awesome. So I took him around the world to help him figure out what he wanted to get done and where he wanted to give his money. Simultaneously, right when that was happening, I had one of the most thrilling experiences of my life, where I got a phone call and somebody was saying, hey, we're looking for a nurse to go to the Middle East. And I was leaving Mosaic and starting this foundation. I said, no, I got a job. Sorry, I'm about to start this new foundation, which I had no idea what I was doing, by the way. They said, no, you're going to want to do this. And I ended up going with a member of the royal family of Qatar. So brother-in-law of the king of Qatar had cancer. He was in town in LA, stage 4 cancer, liver cancer, and needed to go back to Doha. So for 2 months, I lived in the Middle East with the royal family of Qatar, which was like, amazing. And I was there. I was in the long white robe and the red and white checkered, and the whole thing, and just got to be fully entrenched. I felt like a CIA operative. It was amazing. And, I had to keep the guy alive, and they needed a male nurse. They needed a guy that could do critical care. Like if he died in the desert, could I keep him alive until the chopper came? That type of pressure. And a guy that could do chemo and all that stuff. So anyway, like, I guess maybe a point of that is definitely in my story, nothing's wasted. As I went through all these big transitions career-wise, which is pretty unorthodox for most people that do my work now, all those very odd shifts in my career, all of it came to pass. All of it was a resource for the moment that I was in. So it was really great. And then I went back and ran this foundation called the Cornerstone Project, which is a spiritual reference, like the stone the builders rejected became the chief cornerstone. We ended up working in the prison system in California. So I helped a guy. Went with Jesse. I helped him figure out what he wanted to do. He wanted to give people a second chance who had really blown it. Big part of his story that he had just gone through. And so we worked with lifers in prison. So followed some nuns into prison. Catholics do great restorative justice stuff. And I met this group of lifers. And what did they want? They wanted meaningful programming in prison. Most stuff in prison is just bullshit. And even if like religious stuff is so cheesy and so coercive, at least in my view, obviously. Simultaneously, I met a guy named Dan Tocchini. Dan had been doing management consulting for 30 years, 25 years at the time, I guess. 25 years, been doing his own consulting firm, but on the side, he'd been doing gang interventions. Now, Dan Tocchini is like I always imagine if Mother Teresa and Yoda and Tony Soprano had a baby. That's Dan Tocchini. So very loving, very altruistic, very wise, like could talk with you for 5 hours about the intricacies of Soren Kierkegaard's philosophy and Hegel and Heidegger and Hegel. Anyway, a philosopher by nature, but he's a badass. He'd come out of had his own dark side, which I always love connecting people with the dark side, especially people that are friends with their dark side. Those are the people I trust the most. People that everybody has a dark side, by the way, number one. Number two is people that avoid their dark side. They're the most dangerous. People that adopt their dark side and make it an ally instead of an enemy. They're the people I trust. Dan Tocchini was one of those guys. He had, long coke addiction, long history of selling drugs and running guns up and down California. Anyway, he became a mentor of mine right away. I hired him to run this programming in prison. So you can imagine, we'd go into Soledad State Prison up in Central California, and we started by doing a 3-day leadership training with 30 murderers. So that's, bars are locked behind you. You've got these guys that, I've been there. Some of them will be there for the rest of their lives. Most of them, all of them had a life sentence, most of them with the possibility of parole, but they would never get out when we met them. And we put them through the ringer, and we were with them in the process, right? Because, we don't pull any punches in our type of work. But we have our work is, we call it fierce advocacy. So very committed to the person, very committed to what's possible for the person that we're talking to. So advocacy and helping them generate the future they want. Number one, it's fierce in the way that I don't care if you don't like me. In prison, you'd have to have some conversations that were pretty dangerous. If you were going to get to the core of the matter, you had to not have the bullshit conversations. You had to talk about what was there. And for most of them, very victim mindset. For all of them, and for humans, by the way, very victim mindset. Because we'd say, why do you want to be in prison? And they'd all say, we don't want to be in prison. We didn't want to be here. And that's what kept them there. That's what actually caused them to generate their crime, is that they were victims of the system, or the fact that they were from, Compton, or that their dad wasn't around, or the gang, or the blah, 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 or the whatever, their bullshit. Reasons why they didn't make the choice. The choice was made for them by society. This is a big conversation in culture today, of course, that circumstances run the show, and pressures and whatever runs the show instead of I run the show. I get to make choices despite circumstances. Dan Tocchini, that guy I was talking about earlier, Dan says, a man with a vision can never be held hostage by circumstance. And that is true. But you have to have a vision, like something I'm committed to, a stand I'm willing to be in the world. And that orders my circumstances instead of I am my circumstances, which is how most people live. Whatever's happening, I adopt it like it's me. And then I don't like it typically, because that sucks. And I'll complain about it instead of, no. What am I committed to despite my circumstances? And how do I shape adopt them? Like I better get connected and become friends with current reality and own current reality. Like, because whatever's happening is happening. And if I'm avoiding it, there's no chance of something new happening. But if I adopt it, and I'll start with gratitude, I'll start with where I've got. And if I own all that, and I am the rock in the middle of the stream, then I can order my circumstances to fit my vision, not with denial, and not with arrogance, and not with showmanship, but with reality. And I'll adopt it all, and I will line it up in order so that it is fuel for my vision. So we did those types of trainings. Then we trained these 30 murderers to be trainers. So it's not that they could just go be a part of our program. They could run our program, and we believed in them. They felt it. We believed in them beyond the worst moment of their life, which is when they pulled the trigger or when they killed that guy or whatever. They aren't their worst moment. And all of us need to know that I'm not my worst moment of my life. I actually am what I'm committed to. So we believed in them that way. They became trainers. The program is still happening today, like 5 wardens later, which never happens. Usually when a warden comes in, just like a president or whatever, they clear out the administration, clear out all the programs and start over. This program, the Cornerstone Project, is still happening in Soledad State Prison. And these guys still meet on a weekly basis and hold themselves accountable to the ideals and what they're committed to, and to being responsible instead of being victims. And most of them, almost all of them, the next time they went up for the parole board to get out, they got out because they had shifted, because they'd taken responsibility for all their decisions, had a vision for getting out beyond just getting out. Most of their visions were just to get out of prison instead of to get out of prison for something important, like reconcile with their family, like make amends to the person's family that they'd murdered, like change their neighborhood, like shift the gang, like help save people from society. When they had that vision, they wanted to get out, and you could see it when they sat in front of the parole board. So I did that for a couple of years, and it was great. In the meantime, I'd gone through all this personal leadership training just because I'm a sucker for that stuff, and personal development, self-development, self-mastery, whatever you want to call it. We call it self-mastery in my work now. That was always really captivating for me. So did all these trainings, went through a 3-day training and a 4-day training and a marriage thing, and Coaches Academy. After I got out of that, what was I going to do? So got the foundation up hired all the staff, got the board in place, programs were in place. I wanted to go take it to at least nationally, if not globally. The guy that had funded it, a great guy, he wanted to really focus on this one prison and this certain group of people, which is wonderful. It's just not that interesting to me. So I bailed out. What am I going to do now? I could go back in the medical world, of course. I could go in the pastoral work, of course. I could go do philanthropy, of course. But engaging people in the most crucial conversations of their lives, I'm the weird person that thinks that's fucking awesome. So when I'd gone through the coaches training, I knew that who I am and definitely who I'm becoming and where I want to be in my life, it's the right environment for that. Because I'd always there'd been an aspect of me that I'd been told that I was too much, that I was too intense. And people would say hey, why don't you chill out, man? Or why are you so serious? Or in my family, it's I'm the psychological one and I'm the philosophical one. And everything doesn't have to mean something, Adrian, but I was always that kid at the dinner table asking very deep questions, which was a little bit too much for my family, understandably so, from where they were coming from. But I realized in the coaching space, there's no limits here. And people come to me and come to my team in order to get something done. And it's always a very deep conversation. It's not strategic. I mean, strategy is a part of it, right? We coach essentially now works almost solely with founder-driven organizations. So it's somebody that I'm coaching is usually the founder of the organization and the whole team in this place. And there's not strategy. Yes, the strategy might be off, but that's not the problem. The problem is the thinking and the thinking that generated the strategy. Because if you don't unearth the thinking that said the crappy strategy was the best one, you could put a brand new strategy in the hands of that thinking, and the new strategy becomes the old strategy pretty quick. And so it's for our work, it's very personal. So I always warn folks saying, hey, whatever conversations are under the table in your organization, those are the ones that are running it. And I can prove it every time. What people are committed to not talking about is what they're talking about the most. They're just talking about it in their heads or by the water cooler. So we go after the most difficult conversations in any organization. And as I'm looking, eye to eye with the founder, it's them. And there's shit they don't want to talk about. And there's impact they're having that they think that they can't shift. And there's things that they want to run from or want to conceal or want to cover up, which is really human. Looking good in my own eyes is ego 101, right? Survival 101. Look good in my own eyes. Look good. We call it survival needs. Look good, feel good, be right, be in control. Those are the 4 basic human survival needs. Nobody gets a vote on that. That's gravity for human beings. Look good, feel good, be right, be in control. And if those are running your organization, it will suck. You might be successful monetarily, but the experience will suck. And everybody knows that. And so anybody I'm talking to, they come in and it's sideways. And so we have to get to the heart of the matter, which is always the person, the one that can make a choice. And I'm always working with the major stakeholder. So I got out and started coaching because I loved it, because it was just license and liberty to go talk about whatever was there. And I could follow my instincts and go point at the toughest conversations, the thing they don't want to talk about. That's what I'm always listening for. That's where the gold is. It's who was the guy, Foster, that said, the treasure you seek is in the cave you dare not enter. And that's my work. And then, so I've started doing that, started coaching people. And I coached anybody with a little bit of money in a pulse when I first started, as you do, but got a lot of clients really quickly, started working in corporate America because that's where a lot of money was, and some big name clients and blah, 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 blue chip companies. That was great. I don't like corporate people very much. They definitely don't like me, just because there's a lot of hiding spaces in the corporate America. And I'm into entrepreneurialism and people taking risks. And if you don't want to take a jump, don't talk to me, because I'm going to bother you. But if you do want to take a jump, I am perfect for knowing for you to make the right decisions at the right time. The time's almost always now, and it's worth it. And you can enroll a team and get a team aligned. And most really brilliant entrepreneurs are great at getting people rallied around an idea. As the organization develops, they must generate trust in the team. They haven't thought about that. They definitely didn't take a class on that in college. And that's mysterious to them and not mysterious to us. We know how to enroll people in a team and know how to keep the most crucial conversations on the table and help people leave and help people come in and correct and have all the conflict resolution, all that interpersonal stuff, which is where the heart of possibility is. Conflict is where the heart of possibility is, not the thing to avoid, which is most people want to avoid it naturally because they want to look good and feel good and be right and be in control. So they don't want to have the tough conversations. I help really smart people have the right conversations. So that's how anyway, so now the rest is history. 12 years later, Take New Ground is our firm. I'm partnered with that Dan Tocchini guy now. He and I are business partners, and we've got a rapidly growing firm around us, because there's lots of possibilities in this space, and most of the quote unquote coaching space is bullshit, which I agree with. Most of like the training and development space is bullshit, which I agree with. If you look on our website, I say that explicitly. Most any kind of like personality assessment stuff is bullshit, which I agree with. And we get to the heart of the matter, which is a blast. And we're not for everybody, which is perfect. We're for the folks that are really committed to something and are desperate to like find that next level and don't know what it looks like and want to have the real conversations right away. So anyway, that's I can double click on anything in there, but that's how I got to where I am today.
No, man, that's fantastic, Adrian. Thank you for sharing. We covered a lot of ground, a lot of territory, and let's do this to help the listeners. So they've heard
Yep.
your story. Between your birth and today in your personal journey, is there anything we missed that's significant before we pick up where you're at and where you're headed in the future?
Sure. Well, what to share? I mean, there's a lot in there, of course.
No, I'm just saying, is there any significant things that you're like,
sure,
yeah, or I feel led to share this?
Well, the biggest thing, the biggest thing for me of a big shift happened for me coming up on 7 years ago. So I was married, had a couple kids, and that phenomenon that I mentioned in high school, this kind of having an external persona and an internal struggle, that came back. So it was after the time that I'd left the church. So I left the church, started running the foundation. And while everything externally was moving forward, internally, I was pretty much in crisis because I'd lived this pretty big life. I'd traveled the world speaking and teaching and made this shift. And I was lost. I was lost. I had taught all the right stuff. I'd helped thousands of people, but I hadn't really helped myself. Meaning I didn't really know who I was now, in that kind of existential crisis. And for me, that meant, okay, well, start, what helps? Whiskey. And started taking, I didn't drink much at all really in high school. And I mean, after that stint in high school, but then in high school and college, and then worked at a church where, you don't drink too much or really much at all. And then anyway, I started this path that got pretty dark. So started with drinking and started with hiding all the drinking, because I wasn't just social about it. I was intentional about it. Like the point of drinking was relief. It wasn't social. The point of drinking was relief. And so that developed over time and got worse and more over time. And then this whole bifurcated life happened again. I didn't happen to me. I created it, right? So I didn't want to do it out in public. I wanted to deal with it myself. And then that led to a whole other dark side too, which is me being really unfaithful to my wife and all the despair and shame of that. And then once you cross the line, it's like full go. And I'm a full go type guy. People could probably listen or probably pick that up. I'm like a pedal down guy. So pedal down towards the great stuff, pedal down towards the bad stuff as well. And so, yeah, I went through about 5 years of the dark ages there, where I had this kind of double life going on, which ended up becoming very devastating, obviously, for me and for my then wife and for a lot of people around me. And finally crashed a car, finally, got arrested, and I was done. I was toast. It wasn't like I was trying to keep that going. I was desperate for help. And finally, it created enough chaos that I got the help I wanted and finally came to the surface, asked for help, became an AA guy, and got sober. That was October 30th, 2016. So coming up on 7 years. And, had to live with the consequences of that. Obviously devastated my then wife. Her name's Jess. She's amazing. And I had to reconcile with that, so we got a divorce and I had to put a life together. Most people left, most friends left because I'd been running I'd not been honest with a lot of people. I'd been deceptive and obviously out of shame and guilt and blah, 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 but still same impact. And I had to I lost most of my friends and had to start fresh and needed to start fresh, needed to get rid of a lot of the thinking that kept that alive. Because at any point in that process, I could have come clean and said, hey, I'm struggling. I need help. And I didn't, out of shame and out of pride. and burn it all down. And that was 7 years ago. My life is 100% or 180 different today than it was back then, back, mid-August 2016, when I was living in tons of deception and tons of secrets and spending my life kind of keeping that game going. I don't do that anymore. Thank God. Literally, thank God. But, that was another, big significant thing. So, if anybody that's listening to this has issues with alcohol or any kind of addicted to anything and you don't have anybody to talk to, reach out to me. Love to be an ear for you. Love to at least let you know how I did it, how I've stayed sober this time. And I've been through a lot of stuff, gotten married again since then, and in the middle of a divorce process now for different reasons. Thank God, like not for my own integrity reasons. So anyway, I've been in the midst of like throwing myself at living as honestly as possible. And for most of us, we don't wonder about how to do that really well. I can definitely hold something that's not working for a long time and kind of can run my own scam on myself and kind of like playing the martyr, keeping things together, asking for help last, helping other people and avoiding myself. That's going to be a never ending challenge or tension for me, which is like asserting from my own needs and helping other people. I'm first step typically into helping other people. But if I don't take care of myself, I've learned this deeply over the last 7 years. If I don't take care of myself first, it's pretty inauthentic and I'm going to grow in resentment and I'm going to make some bad choices. So over the last 7 years, I've gotten a lot better at paying attention to what I need and paying attention to what I want and paying attention to how to get real. Even with the marriage just exiting now, we probably shouldn't have ever gotten married, but I wasn't that honest. I was trying to make something work that really wasn't working early. And so I'm responsible for that. So anyway, what else we missed? There's a couple of those episodes in there and a lot of darkness and a lot of, so therefore anything I see in somebody else doesn't shock me. Number one, doesn't shock me. And I don't run away from it either. And if we can get the dark stuff on the table, I have zero judgments for anybody, which most of my clients are still shocked by because they could tell me some pretty serious stuff and I take it in stride and don't have any kind of judgment for them at all, which I think as humans, we're all searching for. Like, can I be fully seen and fully accepted at the same time? For most people, they don't want to test those waters. And so we keep a little bit of ourselves to ourselves. And so we live this maybe 90% lifestyle and like live in some kind of secrets, some kind of shame, some kind of history, some kind of area of our life we don't want to get real about. And that feels like prison to us. So I tend to be a stand for people to be fully honest, and that works. And people feel liberated. There's an old rabbinic saying, like, the truth will set you free. I think that's 100% true. So yeah, there's some extra color in there.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. And thank you for being so transparent, Adrian.
Sure.
So when we were discussing Jesus earlier in the first half of the interview, you made a great point that anybody, if you're not familiar with the Bible, or if you think you're familiar with the Bible, it's so basic, but if you really read, especially the New Testament, what Adrian said is completely true. God loves the whole world, and Jesus loves everybody. But Jesus absolutely had a beautiful relationship with the sinners. He had a beautiful relationship with the saints. The people he had the issue with were the hypocrites, the scribes, the Pharisees. And he never took trash. He took everything they gave him when it was towards him as a person. But when they defied God, he drew the line. And that's like the model that we're supposed to have as Christians, to be Christ-like. So Adrian, when you're talking about being real and being transparent and being who you are, the good, the bad, the ugly, it's real. That's who God wants us to be. He doesn't want us to engage in sin, but he'd rather us be real about what we're doing. And that's something that's lacking all over the world in humanity. Right on. People would rather you be fake than you be real, because they're pulling this. So this is my question to you. You are not without sin. I am not without sin. All of our failures are our own. All of our victories are God's. I think you'd agree with that.
Well, yeah. Well, anyway, I've got some thoughts about it. Like,
we can share those. And that's all I'm saying is, like, we can't claim like, oh, I did this. Because in the end, God, we did our part. We did
Right on.
everything we were supposed to do, but we can do everything quote unquote right and fail. We can do everything wrong, quote unquote, and succeed. But what I'm saying is we're called to do something. We do our best and then we accept the results.
Right on.
And the thing is, though, like if me and you are talking and we said something in pride, that's not God's sin, that's our sin. And we don't
Right
want
on.
God to look bad for us. And when it comes to our successes, we can't be proud and be like, look what I did. Because really anything we do means nothing. God could use a cow to do it. You know what I mean? He
Sure.
could make a wall talk or have writing on the wall. He's done it before, right?
Yep.
But this show's all about not just what you overcame or achieved, but the practical steps of how you did it, or at least a
Yeah.
starting point. So for our listeners who are like, man, I'm living this double life.
Yep.
I am living this double life. What are some steps, at least to start the process to help them get out of living in that duality and really that lukewarmness? And that's what God hates the most. It's what he wants to vomit out of his mouth is the lukewarmness. Me, you, everybody. And it doesn't mean he hates us, but he hates our actions in that lying. Because really, if we're not being honest, we're lying, right? And we can
Of
lie to
course.
everybody. We can even lie to ourselves, but we can't lie to God. So what are the steps, Adrian, that at least you used to get out of the lukewarmness and into the heat, the good heat?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so if anybody's listening and has that double life going, and you might be tempted right now to turn this off. So that's okay. Don't turn this off. Just stay right here. It's okay. First off, I would just say you got to put your arms around it. We call it, and there's a metaphor from the Desert Fathers, which are like early Catholics, like St. Augustine and such. They had this metaphor that was called hug the cactus, which is, there's something that's painful that we have to embrace. So if you've got a double life, first off, you don't have to have a double life. You like having a double life. A double life is a strategy at getting by. And if you don't own that, then you're just going to be a victim anyway. And any new steps you take are also going to be, you're going to be a victim in the new steps. So first off, you better own it. And the responsibility is the first step always. So own the fact that you like having a double life, and it's nobody's fault but yours. It's just a choice you've been making. And by the way, get off of if you're a bad person. Stop doing that. Like shame is also bullshit because it's just self-protective. It's not a feeling. Shame is, we could do 2 hours on that, but so get out of the shame and just, if you want something new, which is the only reason to ask this question, by the way, is if you want something new. Because if you don't want something new, then just keep it up. And you will reap the rewards of the double life. I've done that, right? There is a future coming to an inauthentic life. There's a future coming to that. I got the results of that. So if you don't want something new, keep this up, and you'll finally get found out. You'll live this mediocre existence. I don't think there's anything else coming for you. If you're in this double life, you will have a mediocre existence. I had that. Like I couldn't actually get the full amount of joy on the table because I was unwilling to suffer. So if you want something that's unprecedented, like even beyond what you can imagine, if you want something new, then you got to really own current reality, which is I've got a double life and I like it. So that's first off. Step one is ownership. I don't know, getting out of denial, whatever you want to call it. Now, first person you got to be honest with is yourself. And it means probably stop beating yourself up or judging other people. Because that's usually how people justify their behavior, is it's them and their own history. And my dad didn't, my mom didn't, my history didn't, this thing happened. Therefore, all this kind of Freudian view of the world, like I am my past. That's what Freud tried to tell us. An etiological view, the scientists call it, I am the effect, the past is the cause. You got to get out of that. And you got to get out of judgment and resentment, which is like it's somebody else's fault. That's also not true. It's choices you're making. So if you decide to get real with yourself and say, okay, so first off, you got to tell yourself the truth. What's really happening? And journaling is always helpful for this. I know when I was in the dark side, I didn't want to journal just in case somebody would find it because I, didn't trust anybody. But you got to find a space to be honest with yourself. And my experience and why I know why the recovery world works is because there's people that are on the journey. There's people that are 5 days, 5 years, 10 years, past where you've been. And they could say the same stuff you're scared to death to saying, but they don't die when they say it. It's actually part of their journey. So I'd find somebody. So once you get honest with yourself, and that's like, get real, like sit down, write everything down. What's really going on? And usually what are the conversations that I need to have with myself, with other people, with God? What are the conversations I need to have? What are the things I'm working really hard not to talk about? I'd get real about that. Second, I'd find somebody that's been there before. So for good reason, we don't trust a lot of people in our lives. Like I know that whenever I told the truth and was real, a lot of the religious people in my life ran for the hills. So that's true, is that most people don't want to get close to darkness because they don't want to see their own. So I'd find the most honest person in your life, like the one that's been through shit, the one that has fucked up especially somebody that's has already fucked their world up and is here to talk about it now. That's the person you talk to, because they needed grace for themselves. They needed to reinvent themselves, and they've done it, and they've got the scars to prove it, and they're not hiding the scars. Like it's actually, you know, in the 12-step world, they say we do not close the door on the past. So somebody that can talk about their past with honesty and with compassion and with conviction. So I'd find somebody that's already walked the road and say, hey, I need to have a conversation. Can I tell you a few things? And if they're the right person, that's great. So you got to get honest with other people. Then you got to that's step 2. Step 3 is you better get a real clear vision on what's worth having the most important conversations, which are with people that are closest to you, like your partner, like your spouse, like your kids, like your intimate friendships. Because when you bring this to them, it's going to be heartbreaking. It is, because you've been lying. And you better get a vision for what's worth it. Because if you take incremental truth is still a lie. So if you tell a little bit of what's true and don't tell the whole truth, you're still lying. And so if you start these conversations with the people closest to you, you want to be in a place that you're already fully surrendered. Like you have detached from outcomes. Like I need to go be honest, and I can't manipulate the person anymore, which is what we've been doing when we've been living a double life, is manipulating other people. I'm done manipulating. I'm done trying to control this person or the situation. I need to be honest. I don't know what's going to happen, but I need to really be honest. So you got to count the cost of that, because people might leave, like my story, and I'm not a victim to it. I earned it. And it makes sense. Wouldn't be the choice I would have made, not the choice I make every day when people tell me drastic things they've done or deplorable things. I don't run for the hills. I get closer, but most people run for the hills. So get ready for that. But you got to have your own integrity and what life will be like if you live in the light. You better get clear on that. So I'd write all that down. And then you start thoughtfully having a conversation. Therapists usually aren't good at this. Find somebody that's done it. Talk to me. I'll help you frame out how to have the conversation with people closest to you. We do this all the time, even with founders I work with and their spouses, or even with like their teammates. Like there can be some really dark stuff going on. And so you got to know how to have that conversation really responsibly. And that's all you need, man. If you do those steps, as I'm just thinking off the cuff, it's a great question. If you do those steps, now you've got a great adventure. Now you're playing to win. And you don't know how good it can get. You're going to go through some pain. It's going to get worse before it gets better. Count on that. People are going to leave. You're going to feel like crap for a while, and you're going to feel alone. Anytime people pursue the promised land, they hit the desert, like the Old Testament stories, like you leave Egypt, slavery. On the way to the promised land, you got to go in the desert. So anytime you take a stand for freedom, you will hit isolation. That comes next, because you're trying something new and you don't know this terrain. And so you're going to feel really alone. So you better be ready for that. But if you stand there and you can slowly put your life back together with integrity, I'm a living example that your life can be immeasurably more than you ever think or imagine if you put your own integrity and your own truth on the table first, and your real legacy, like the one that's worth dying for, like legacy, like the impact you leave on other people when you're gone. If you put that center for you, then you're going to be great. But it's a great conversation, David.
Yeah. And Adrian, I know for time's sake, normally we have no time limit on the podcast, but because you were so kind to adjust the time today, I know you have to go and I have to go, but I'd love to continue this conversation, another episode, which we've never done in 4 years. So if you're open to that, I know our listeners
I'd
would
love it.
love to continue it. Yeah, we'll have a
I would
hanging
love
out
it.
session and continue this. But man, thank you for being on the show. Thank you for being so transparent. And thank you for bringing so
Yeah.
much truth and balance and being real about your highs and lows and strengths and weaknesses. So if
Yeah.
someone does connect, they're listening to you and they're connecting and they want to continue the conversation with you, whether it's that personal struggle or that corporate struggle, what's the best way for them to reach you and continue the conversation?
Well, first off, thanks for having me on. And yeah, this hour and a half flew by, and would love to be on again to talk through. You probably get, maybe if you get feedback from this episode and there's questions people have that want to hear more about it, that's awesome. I don't mind going deeper in any of that context, and would love to talk about the future. Just, the commitment that we are to make a difference with founders and folks that are striving in business. If they want to get connected to me now, obviously you can go to Instagram like everybody else, adrian.k on Instagram, adrian@takenewground.com. You can email me directly. Anybody that's seeking and striving after something that's going to be impeccable, I'll make time for anybody. So reach out and let's have a conversation. Let me tell about a couple different opportunities, just because I don't know when the next episode is going to happen.
Yeah. And also just, so you know, you can let people know where you are today and where you're heading. So if they want to connect and help or contribute anything to help you, man, tie that all together now. I just was trying to respect your time, and I didn't want to be able to be like halfway through and then just shut down.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it, man. Let me tell folks that are wanting something new and are desperate for a next step, obviously reach out to me, and I'd love to connect with anybody. If you want, there's 2 different environments, 2 different events, 2 different experiences that we're having in the next couple months, that if you want to take a leap, come do these things. One's called the Revenant Process. It's a 4-day personal leadership accelerant process, the Revenant Process. We are revenant.com, REVENANT. We are revenant.com. This next one's up at the end of October in Hawaii. It's 4 days. It's no holds barred. It's 30 very successful people in the room, and we talk about everything. It's not me with a whiteboard teaching you stuff that won't ever matter. It's a deep conversation. It's highly experiential. It's only for folks that are courageous, or at least want to be courageous, and if there's something missing for you, if you already know there's something missing for you and you don't know what it is, that's a perfect place to come. If you know what the struggle is and you can't get over on it, it's a perfect place to come. So come to the Revenant Process. I went through this training 18 years ago. I co-train it with that guy, Dan Tocchini now. It's world changing. We surveyed 2,000 graduates recently, and 97% of them said it was in the top 3 experiences of their life. So that's true. It's true for me. When I went through it, now I get to help train it. And it's amazing breakthroughs for people, and all very successful, engaging people. So come to the Revenant Process end of October. If you've got a business and you've been really successful, we just put together a new training that's for folks that have really made it and are now what's next in life. That's called Icon. And that's going to be in Tuscany, second week of November. So that's for folks that you've already killed it. And now it's like, what the hell's next? And maybe you're 40 and you already killed it. Maybe you've already exited, or maybe you're about to have an exit in the next 3 to 5 years. And you want to get yourself ready, get your world ready to make a difference. Come to Icon. That's takenewground.com/icon. You can learn about that. Both of these things, you just apply, and somebody from my team will talk to you to make sure it's the right experience for you before you invest the money and the time to come. So takenewground.com/icon. Love to have anybody apply for that, and we'll have a conversation, see if it's the right fit for you. So if you want to take a leap, trust me, we love helping people make the most important, impactful conversations and decisions in their lives. So that's what we stand for. So can't wait to have another conversation, David. You're awesome. Thanks, man, for having me on.
Oh, Adrian, absolutely. And then quickly, the best way to reach them through the website, and then which social media platforms the best?
Yeah. Hit me up on Instagram, adrian.k.
Okay.
Is my handle.
Okay.
ADRIAN.K.
All right. And then do you have time for one more question?
I do. I got 2 minutes.
2 minutes. All right. There's a point you made earlier, and I want to leave the listeners with this, because you hear the saying so many times, don't judge people, don't judge people. And that's BS, because truth is you shouldn't judge people. But good judgment is part of a balanced Christian life and a balanced world. So how do you explain to people, Adrian, the difference between judging people and good judgment? Because there's
Yeah.
absolute commandment for us to exhibit good judgment.
Yeah. Well, first off, you're going to judge people anyway. Your brain's going to do it, right? So first off, own that. And
Yeah, we're
we
human.
say,
It's happening.
yeah, right. And it's good. It's useful, right? So number one is, or at least the principle that I think most important to talk about is be hard on the problem and soft on the person. Hard on the problem, soft on the person. If somebody's living outside their own integrity, they are dying for a conversation. A broken commitment is a cry for help. A broken commitment is a cry for help. So if someone's doing something devious and something that's outside of their commitment to you or their stated commitment to the team, or if they're a spouse or something and something's going sideways and you have judgment for them, be really hard on the problem. They're dying to have the conversation. So be hard on the problem, be soft on the person, meaning, they aren't their worst decision. They aren't. Like, they are not, that's not who they are. That is the choice they're making. And so you don't do them any favors by sugarcoating how bad the problem is. So be really hard on the problem. And I would say just treat them the way you'd want to be treated. Like, if you've been devious, if you've been sideways, and somebody comes and approaches you with love and commitment and the truth, both of those things, grace and truth simultaneously, that makes the difference.
Amen. Thank you for that, Adrian. Hey, it's been a true honor having you here. Ladies and gentlemen, don't just listen to this great content that Adrian shared, but like our slogan says, do what you know you need to do. Repeat it each day so you can have a great life in this world, but most importantly, in eternity to come. So I'm David Pasqualone. This was our friend, Adrian Koehler. And Adrian, I said that right?
Perfect.
All right.
Perfect.
Just want to make sure. Koehler like Taylor. So listen,
it,
thank you, Adrian, for being here. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here. Share this episode with your friends and family, not so we can be rich and famous and have fortune and glory like Indiana Jones, but so we can glorify God, people can get help, we can see growth.
Amen.
And we're all just better humans together, right?
Awesome.
So
awesome.
Thank you again, Adrian.
Thank you, brother. Good to be with you. Talk soon.
Talk soon, brother. Bye. And ladies and gentlemen, we'll see you in the next episode. Ciao.
The Remarkable People Podcast. Check it out. The Remarkable People Podcast. Listen, do, repeat. For life. The Remarkable People Podcast.